So there's a lot of videos out there about what do we know and what we don't know about DC 5G. And I don't want to make another video of that. So I want to kind of take a different did you notice kind of video about the series and about some of the hysteria around it, and also talk a little bit by why it's becoming so difficult to talk about 5G in general. Hey everybody, this is Perch. I've done some videos about 5G. In fact, if I look at the stats for my channel over the last roughly 90 days or so, the videos about 5G and where it all goes are some of the top ones. Now, my videos have been fairly, I would say, measured in terms of what's going on with 5G and where's it all going and how's it, what is it something to panic about? And in particular, I did a couple videos on Dan Didio when he was removed from his position and what it all meant and kind of where it goes from there. And what's interesting is that there's certainly a high amount of interest in those videos, but mostly positive. I mean, you always get some downvotes on things, but mostly positive. People appreciate the information. And I've noticed that in other places in social media, people are taking kind of a more measured approach to it, saying, this is not the end of the world. No, AT&T isn't going to sell DC, calm down. Let's see how it plays out. Maybe as I've been using the term, the wokepocalypse of 5G is not going to happen. This was hype, that was generated by bleeding Google for clicks that people went off on. And I think that's a healthy message to send. Now, I have gotten some feedback from some others who have said, hey, every time you talk about this, even, regardless, I don't think these people are actually listening to the videos. I think they're just seeing the headline of the video. And maybe my headlines are a little too clickbaity. I'm not sure. But they're saying, hey, you're actually, regardless of what you say in the video, you're reinforcing a angry troll narrative about, DC, and you should stop it. Which I always, when I hear any bit of advice, I listen and I try and look at it through the other person's eyes, because the biggest blind spots anyone has is for themselves. So it's important that we kind of pay attention to what other people are trying to tell us, especially when they're taking the time to try and tell us something, that we take it seriously. So I have. I am in a bit of a quandary a little bit in that I want to address rumors and gossip and things that are gotten out of control and are wrong. I want to address those things head on. I don't think it makes sense to hide from them. I don't think it makes sense to try and ignore these things and just have happy fun time generic. Nobody can object to this kind of videos. Those aren't useful either. What I tell you here is how I actually feel, and I make no bones about it. I'm not trying to impress anybody. I'm not trying to attack anybody. It is what it is. So where 5G is concerned, I have hit upon the rumor many times on other channels as well about the AT&T selling it off or not selling it off, and how I think that's nonsense. And the people who have perpetrated that are either willfully trying to panic people or just misinformed. Either way, or both. But 5G in particular, I've always described as an age of apocalypse-like storyline. And I come to that one because there were a lot of people who were alarmed, pissed, irritated, frustrated when it was announced that the X-Men titles were going to effectively halt, and this new storyline was going to come in and take over the books for a period of time. And the way that Marvel calmed down people at the time was to say, it will return to the Uncanny X-Men and X-Force and all the books it will return to that. This is a storyline, a temporary interruption. And they were kind of forced to do that because a lot of people were going nuts about Marvel, canceling their favorite book. And is it going to be this new Age of Apocalypse title forever? And is this, what happened to the characters I know and love and everything else? So Marvel was kind of forced at one point to just come out and say, no, it is going to go back to normal. You should see how this storyline plays out. Which, to Marvel's credit or defense or whatever you want to say it, they didn't want to say that. I mean, they just want to be able to tell their story, leave some imagination to things, and not have to spell it out so clearly to everyone that, oh yeah, these titles are going to, they're going to come back. Because if they do that, they're arguably spoiling the punch of their storyline. They're spoiling some of the value to what they have on their hands. And that's no good. But they at the same time the fan outrage was getting out of hand, so Marvel stepped in. Well, now here's DC, and I think they find themselves in a similar position where there's at least been some rumors of a disruption, of a glimpse into the future, of some shift, and they're having to come back and say, no, it's sorry, they haven't yet. DC has not come out yet and said, look, chill out. You're still going to have all your favorite heroes. It will be okay. The closest it's came to that is Jim Lee saying, he hopes to continue to keep doing this in the company and telling the stories of these characters for another 85 years. I forget the exact number. It was a high enough number that he'll be, long dead by then, just of old age, not coronavirus. And so it is an interesting dynamic we've got here. Now, the other thing you've got is that there's a promo poster that DC has done that you're starting to see in some of the preview catalogs around Generation 1. Now, again, this is one of the ones where the answer is right in front of our face, so the march toward DC's future begins here, Generation 1. And at the bottom of this little piece of promo marketing art, you see Generation 1, G2, G3, G4, G5. So right off the bat, I want to point out that G5 as Generation 5 is a hell of a lot more entertaining, makes a lot more sense than 5G, which is a cellular technology. It's G5 is much better. But what you're seeing here is kind of the march toward DC's future. And the important thing to note here, if I'm just asking people to kind of pay attention to what we're being seen, is we're talking about Generation 1. We're talking about kind of retelling the secret history of the DC universe, unfolds as seen through the eyes of Wonder Woman, Lucius Fox, King Faraday, and more. So we're getting some different characters who are showing us the makeup of the DC universe. And we're kind of establishing, Wonder Woman's early days as a hero, which I've done another video on this, makes sense. This is one of the videos, by the way, I did does it matter if Wonder Woman is the first hero or not on DC? And I got some comments of like, hey, you're playing into Comicsgate anti-women narrative with that headline. And I'll work on the headlines. I'm not sure. I think it's a legitimate question to ask. And I think if you listen to the video, it's clear. I have no problem with that. And it's a silly, anyway. It's a tough thing. I'm juggling that bit of advice right now in my head. But what I want to point out here is that we've got, you are here Generation 1. You've got G2, G3, G4, G5. And what do we see? Well, in G2, we have old school Batman, Silver Age looking Batman. The Batman we kind of associate with, bat dances and sharks and silly things. The Adam West Batman, although it's comic book Batman. And then in G3, we've got kind of Teen Titans, Robin, Nightwing there. And it's very much that kind of 80s era of what looks like Robin, probably into the 90s. And then in G4, Generation 4, we've got the Scott Snyder, Greg Capullo Batman, the Court of Owls, the New 52 kind of world, the 2000s era. And then in G5, we've got another bat symbol. Now, we're not seeing a Batman face, and maybe there it leads to the rumor of, are we going to get a new Batman, a new Duke Fox as the new Batman? Maybe that's where this is all leading for a period of time. But the important thing to note is that in G2, G3, G4, we're seeing the same Bruce Wayne in there. We're seeing, Robin's obviously in the middle, but this is the Bruce Wayne era. So it's not a case of, hey, we've got this Batman through the ages, and then suddenly 5G has to be all these new versions of the characters. No, we see the progression of G2 to G4 or G2 to G3. We're seeing these different views of the character. And so 5G is simply kind of the future of DC and what comes next. It does not mean that everything is being replaced. Now, some may be quick to say, hey, you're doing a lot of conjecture here, and it could very well mean that everything is being shifted. Sure, it could. Anything could happen, but the likelihood is very low. We're getting a Batman movie, Robert Pattinson, a Bruce Wayne. If the comics were going to suddenly introduce a permanent new Duke Fox, different Batman, right simultaneous for the movie, that would make very little, and when I say very little, I mean zero sense, and it won't happen. Does that mean that there's a storyline where we get to see what a Duke Fox Batman in the future would look like? Yeah, probably. Does it mean it's going to stick forever? No, that makes no sense. So there's a lot of little clues like this, and as we're seeing more and more come out of DC, we're seeing more and more marketing, we're seeing more and more hints toward what the future would look like. The other big one we got was in the end of Flash 750, where the Scott Lobdell, Brett Booth story of Wally as the new kind of Metron meets Dr. Manhattan says time is broken, things are overlapping, we've got to kind of repair the timeline and reality, and he's going to fix it. This sets up the storyline very nicely, as many things are setting up the storyline. So we're in for a bumpy. I mean, the bumpy part of the ride, as a critic or as somebody who's looking at this from afar, is that we've gone from You're the Villain, which I think, and I've argued that's been a mixed success, and that different writers are definitely treating it in different ways, and it has parts of it have been okay, parts of it not. But as a marketing initiative, it's been a little uneven, I think. Even if there's been some good stories through it, some bad stories, as a marketing initiative, it's been fairly uneven. And then we're going into what I guess is, for lack of a better word, the end game of You're the Villain, the Hella Rising, and the, when exactly are all these things happening? Perpetua won, evil took over, the things are lost, and then the Justice League storyline immediately kind of pivoted. The Vendetti's storyline pivoted into the Eradicator and and all that. And it's a fine story, but it is, if you're a reader and you're following along, you're like, okay, so does this take place before the big, where the stuff doesn't now completely make sense. It's kind of all over the place. And then we're going into another event. We're going into death metal, and then we're going into 5G or G5, I guess I should say. So that's kind of too many initiatives all stacked like dominoes. And I think that's the big risk, both for comic shops, for fans. It's creating a lot of incentives for people to jump off. And what we haven't seen in the marketing is the incentive to jump on. We've seen some amazing art from Capullo around the death metal event and some pretty cool looking out of this world stuff. Scott Snyder's promising us a wild, kind of crazy ride, and I think he'll deliver, what he promises. Some people don't like the wild and crazy ride, but he'll provide that. And you've got a bunch of other kind of authors doing their various things throughout the various comics, and it all gets pulled together. I think the one thing that we can tell from Generation 5 with some certainty is this. It's an event or a moment or an imprint. It's going to at least temporarily change things. And the stuff that's successful will continue forward. Its success or failure will really depend on how good the stories are. If the stories are not good, then it will get reverted rather quickly. And most of all, I think the silver bullet to all this, the shining logic to all this is, if you should look for the comics that you're going to enjoy reading and keep to that. I think nothing that DC is doing or Marvel is doing right now in terms of their big events is a compelling argument for you to hang in with a book you don't like. Now, that may seem like a weird way of saying it, but in the past, Marvel and DC both gave you some, promise that, hey, if you stick with this. I mean, perfect example, the last one of DC, Flashpoint. Flashpoint gave a promise that, hey, even if you don't like this story, stick with it because it's leading to a major shift and things are going to be different. And it led to the New 52. And so there was a, hey, stick with this and something major is going to happen. Through the last 5 years, 6 years, maybe a little bit more than that, Marvel and DC have burned through their credibility, where I don't think either one of them has the power right now to say, hey, even if you don't really like it, stick with it, it'll get better, I promise. Not many people are buying that now. They have to kind of prove their mettle. They have to prove it. It's turned into a show me, don't tell me kind of world in comics. So I think as we're seeing this marketing and everything else, DC is trying to say, hey, it's the future. You should get excited about it. It lays the groundwork for excitement yet to come. First, all the rest. That's all great, but they have to deliver. So these comics have to be good. These 5 one-shots, everything else, there's some delays in it. That's not a good sign, but maybe they're being retooled to be better. Sounds good. The key is they've got to deliver something compelling to win back those fans, to believe them that at the end of this, they get through it. Something good happens. Undoubtedly, a lot of people are going to buy death metal. They're going to buy it because they like the wild ride of Snyder. They like the amazing art from Capullo. They're going to be in on that because it's a crazy ride. But I don't believe that event alone will keep readers at DC if the story turns out to be bad. If the art is kind of uninspired, it's not Capullo's best work, it's scratchy. If the Scott Snyder writing is convoluted and weird and just feels too much like shock storytelling rather than a good story, then you're not going to see readers say, "Well, that wasn't so good, but let's just see what comes next." They're not. They're you're going to have to deliver a good story to get them hooked for the next story, I guess is what I'm saying. Now, can they do it? Probably. I mean, Metal was very successful, got a lot of people in. Certainly, some people liked it, some people didn't, but on the whole, it did very well, and it probably will. If death metal is great, a lot more people are going to be inclined to try G5 and whatever comes out of that with the storytelling. And if some of those stories are also good and do not seem like pandering nonsense and everything else, then they'll stick around more and DC will build back up that audience. Pretty simple. DC brought, they bought themselves some goodwill, and even the New 52, in many cases, ended badly. The initial kickoff was seen as largely successful. They beat Marvel handily in numbers for quite a while, and there was something for everyone, and it worked. At least for a period of time, it worked. And so DC needs to pull off something similar now. Show us something that works and stick to it, and life will be okay. In conclusion, I think, Generation 5, which I'm just going to start getting in my head G5 as opposed to 5G, there's some potential in it. Definitely. There's a potential for a great story and a great plot, and there always was, is the key. All the rumors, all the nonsense, all the fear, all the crazy doesn't stop the fact that, there's always been the potential for there to be a great story. And hopefully there will be again. What do you think? Leave me a comment below. Please, if you're there, like, no, damn it, no way, I refuse to ever accept that it could be good, I reject. I mean, that could be your point of view. If it is, I mean, mainly for your own sanity, I'm sorry to hear that. I think, at the very least, being able to say, look, I will look at it, won't necessarily spend money on it. If it's bad, I'm not going to buy it. I think that's perfectly reasonable take. But let me know your thoughts below in comments. Does this kind of make sense? Does this all track? Would love to hear your thoughts, your opinions. Like, subscribe if you'd like to be annoyed. Click the bell for notification. But most importantly, thanks for listening.